Howdy folks, thanks for coming, thanks for having me. As you can tell, I'm not from around here. So I'm not from around here, but I am based in Asheville, North Carolina. I chose that because it's the center of the universe. So anyway, I want to thank the organizers for having me here. Where's Pamela? And I want to apologize for sometimes being difficult to contact. Let's see how this thing works. I made Pamela a meme. Pamela, you guys can't read it. It says, don't take it personally, but sometimes I just don't like answering texts or calls. I've recently had to hire a manager to manage my manager. So where do I point this at the computer? Okay. So anyway, I got a few notes here. I'll have to look at them a little bit, so just bear with me. But I think I've got a few stories to tell you guys. So I guess, what am I doing here? What's a kayaker doing standing on the stage in front of you? Well, I'm here because of change. I'm here because of massive changes in my life that have brought me to the point of where I am. Okay? So what are you guys doing there? Well, you guys are here because you're creative. Okay? So what is it to be creative? Well, being creative is to come up with something new. Okay? It's to change what was there before. It's to make it better. It's to evolve. Perhaps it's a remix, perhaps it's an evolution. So I think we can bond over something there. This change, it's an interesting word, okay? It's the bridge between good and bad, and the traffic goes both ways. So one day it's like, hey, I can't be your friend unless you change your attitude. The next day it's, hey, I can't be your friend because you've changed. And change is like a holiday. So what's changed in my life? Well, a lot's changed in my life. First of all, the obvious. How can you not love that face? Started as that guy, became that guy, became that guy, became that guy, and yes, more recently, became this responsible father. So that's been a massive change in my life. Obviously, changed a lot of my perspectives on things. So I haven't done much to really change the world in any kind of huge way, but I have found creative ways to create a career out of exploring remote rivers all around the world. As Chris said, I also have a video production company which has paired well with my paddling career, obviously helped move it forward. And although I didn't go to business school or anything, I believe that much of what I learned is what I learned on the river. I've been kayaking since I was 6 years old, and I've taken those skills, applied them to everything that I do, and it manifests itself as we go. So that's what I'm here to do, is share a little bit about those experiences, and maybe, just maybe, I'll send you guys off into your day with a little seed of inspiration or something. So for me, growing up in South Africa, it was a good life. It was a simple life. No TV in the house, no video games, and I did have a kayak and a river, so that was nice. And yes, it was during the apartheid era and the economic sanctions that came along with that. So I had the disadvantage of having very little access to the equipment I wanted for what I wanted to do, and very few mentors to show me what could be done in a kayak. But at the same time, I had the very distinct advantage of having nobody to tell me what couldn't be done. Okay? So immediately, through necessity, I was forced to innovate. I learned the dark art of learning by doing, learning how to evolve. Okay? So now I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are thinking, wait, did he say apartheid? Whoa, back it up a little bit. So yeah, let's talk about that. Yes, if I'd stayed a product of the environment that I'd grown up in, I probably wouldn't be able to comfortably stand on the stage here. I might be at a Donald Trump rally today. Oh yes, I had to do it. Because oh yes, I know a racist when I see one. Okay. So when I was growing up, I had a very, very narrow view of the world. Okay. In fact, I didn't even know anybody who had a liberal view. Okay. So while I had these advantageous disadvantages that drew talent out of me, it forced me to confront and face up to the worst parts of my life. Okay? So as I started to travel the world, I realized that for a South African, on the issues of political views, there was no middle ground. You were either here or you were there. So I had no choice but to face up to what my view on racism is and what I'm willing to say about it. Okay? So the end result was a full swing of the pendulum to a distinct liberal view that I'm very, very proud of. And the same happened for a lot of my friends back in South Africa. So I consider that to be a great change in my life that was spurred by the pursuit of a sport. I just wanted to go kayaking around the world, and I realized that every single time I said anything with any kind of political connotation, I was suddenly finding myself in the racist camp, a part of apartheid. So I had to choose between one and the other. So I had a catalyst for change, and I wish that everybody had a catalyst for change. So that gets that out of the way. That springboards us off into my great world travels. Okay. So when I was about, let's see here, in my early teens, I came across this photograph. It's of a French expedition trying to run the world's biggest rapids on the Congo River. This is a photocopy of Paris Match magazine. This is the last photograph ever taken of them before all 7 expedition members disappeared. But around the same time, I came across this photo, and if you look in the top left of the photo there, you'll see a kayaker going off the waterfall. It's a guy called Marco Begni. I was 10 years old when I saw this photo, and I remember clearly going to my dad and saying, "Dad, one day I'm going to run that waterfall." And he said, "Son, if you practice, train hard, one day you'll do that." Well, about 10 years ago, I ran that very same waterfall. 10 years later, should I say, I ran that same waterfall successfully. And after college, I ended up going up to the Zambezi River in Zambia, where I based myself for 5 years. And there, I became a raft guide and a video boater, the guy who makes the rafting videos. What I learned there is that there's another way, that I didn't have to go into genetics or biochemistry. Nothing against those, but there was a way for me to earn a living and enjoy it. And so it all began. Boy, we've got to take care of this wind. My notes blow away, I'm screwed. So while I was in the Zambezi, it didn't take long before a kayak manufacturer over here in the US spotted me, and they sent me in this bus on a tour of the US freestyle kayak competition circuit. I was doing crazy things that were raising the attention of people. I was doing things that others weren't willing or able to do. And not only did it give me exposure, notoriety even, but I became better and better at what I did. What a lot of people didn't realize was that those athletic accomplishments were simply a manifestation of a spiritual journey that I was on. And so it was after about 4 seasons touring the US that I was invited on a major expedition to Tibet. The goal here was to run the deepest gorge in the world. It had been attempted before. A member of the team died. The trip was aborted. And so this is the first time that I got to paddle truly into the unknown, to take on a seemingly impossible task, break it down into small digestible chunks, and implement those steps of the way, one at a time. I had a lot of time to think on that trip. I was thinking about how this little kayaking jaunt I was on should come to an end sooner or later. I felt that maybe this was the pinnacle of that adventure. And because of pressure from society and my student loan bank, I thought maybe it's a good time for me to get a real job. And after 37 days on the river, my late friend Dave Allardyce was sitting with me, staring at the campfire, We hadn't looked at ourselves in the mirror since the start of the trip. We hadn't heard music. We cooked all our own meals, carried everything with us. It was cool. We were reminiscing, staring at the fire, and he broke out of the blue. He broke into this quote from a guy called Sterling Hayden from a book called The Wanderer. And it starts off by saying, to be truly challenging, this voyage that we call life must be based on a firm foundation of financial unrest. It goes on to talk about how people in the pursuit of security fling their lives beneath the wheels of routine. Then goes on to ask a question. Where then lies the answer? In choice, bankruptcy of pocket or bankruptcy of soul? And in that moment, that was my moment of incitement. That was the kick in the pants that I needed. It was right there that I decided, okay, kayaking is going to be my life. It's going to be who I am. I also realized that now would probably be a good time to take a serious look at the Inga Rapids of the Congo River. So to give you an idea about that Congo expedition, let me show you, well, first of all, there's the photo of me standing in front of the very same wave featured in the photo of that French expedition almost 20 years earlier. And that particular photo had become the centerpiece of that goal. I was like, I'm going to go get that photo. And believe me, it was a long road. In fact, it was 10 years and hundreds of rivers that finally led me to this point after the Yarlem Sangpo expedition. So let me play the teaser to the film I made. Is there a way for us to crank the volume on this thing? Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert, we made it. But what you saw in the opening there, sorry the sound wasn't too loud there, but was a great sense of trepidation from all of us. We all knew that we were going in way over our heads on this one. But what we did was, despite everybody, people all the way telling us not to go, we huddled together as a group and we insulated us from the fear that people were trying to put in our minds. And we realized that if we could get through today, well, that means we can get through tomorrow. And if we can get through tomorrow, we can get through the next day. And if we can do that, we can finish the thing. And we did. And although we got to put just a tiny little piece in the history of kayaking and in the history of the Congo River, which by the way is plentiful, we personally grew in very profound ways. And that's the reason that people like ourselves do sports to challenge ourselves, is for the personal growth that comes of it. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be sport. Anyway, at the time, I'd had a long and successful kayaking career. I was at the top of my game. I was like, what's next? Well, that's what everybody else wanted. I got back to the US and I got a call from 60 Minutes Sports, and they said, we'd like you to help us film a feature on whitewater kayaking on the Great Falls of the Potomac River in Washington, DC. I was like, sweet, this is awesome. I was hired as a filmmaker. The goal here was to feature some of the local legends, and each of them would have a distinct role in the production. And in particular, we wanted to feature a couple of female paddlers. Enter our good friend, Shannon Christie. Sorry, quick photo there. So we chose our friend Shannon, not only because she was a great kayaker, but because of her personality. We felt that she embodied what we wanted to portray the kayak community as. She perhaps even showcased what we wanted people to think of us. So she was a perfect choice. My job was to follow her and my friend Jason, who you just saw there, and to document their first runs down the Great Falls Rapids in Washington, DC. And everything went great. All smiles all the way. And after a couple of days, we felt that we'd done a really good job building a profile of our sport, building a profile of people within it. And like I said, it was for 60 minutes. This was a big deal for our sport. On day 3, I turned up at the river, I started setting up my camera, and I looked up, and there was a red kayak floating at the base of the falls with nobody in it. So after that, we spent the next 3 hours battling with ropes and safety equipment to try get Shannon out of the river. She was pinned in the rocks. Finally, we got her out, but it was too late. And this wasn't the first, nor was it the second person that I'd seen drown, but it was by far the greatest effect on my life. Now, I'll spare you the cliches of she died doing what she loves, and the reward outweighs the risk, because I called bullshit on all of that after I called her parents to tell them how their 23-year-old daughter had died. And it's when you're having that conversation that you realize that when we put our passion, whatever it is, against death, if the scale tips in the wrong direction, it's not worth it. So for me, that was a very sobering moment in my career, where I was like, hey, what the hell are we doing? So I didn't kayak for 6 months, which was the longest amount of time I hadn't kayaked since I was 6 years old. And when I finally pulled the courage back together to get back on the horse, I decided the perfect place to do that would be to go back to familiar waters, to go back to my home river on the Zambezi in Zambia. This is where I could rekindle my love for my sport. And on the 5th day back in the water, I drowned. Yes, you heard me right. I was unconscious for almost 5 minutes and spent 3 days in the hospital with water in my lungs. And once again, I had to further kind of analyze and change my perspective further. You know, we're always evolving, but I'm talking about a radical term. I'm talking about, what am I going to do? Okay, you just got fired from your dream job. It's one of those moments. Okay. So really, you know, the ultimate question, this I thought about as I lay in a Zambian hospital, is, who am I? Okay. Now that's an easy question to avoid when everything's comfy and cushy, but when you're on the edge of a precipice, that's the only question. It all boils down to that. Who am I? What am I trying to do? So it would seem clear for me what the next step would be, or what the path would be. I produced this award-winning film. I've been in my film career as much as my kayak career, so why wouldn't I just go there? Well, what I've been struggling with since the high point of my career is what a lot of people struggle with. Okay, it's what professional athletes struggle with when they grow old. It's what CEOs struggle with after a long, successful career and they want to retire. And it's what anyone who's changing profession struggles with. And that is the question of, what is my new identity? When I no longer do this, who is Steve Fisher? Steve Fisher, the kayaker, just became, what did he become? This is the question. Who am I? Who will I become? So what to do? Okay? Well, first, before change, we need to identify what it is that we're doing that prevents that change. Okay? And that could be something that you're not doing, it could be something you are doing, but certainly we have to figure out, okay, what do I need to stop doing and what do I need to start doing to make the change occur? Okay? But really, where the problem is rooted in fear. It's fear of the unknown, it's fear of failure, and my personal favorite, fear of success and the cascade of events that occurs once you start the ball rolling. It's like my Congo expedition. Once we said, all right, we're going to do the Congo expedition. In fact, when I pitched it to Red Bull, I pitched it for 10 years, and when they finally said yes, I went, oh shit. It's like that, okay? So what is fear? Well, fear is supposed to be the voice of reason, the thing that often keeps us alive. But there's a lot of misplaced fear. I think in our society today, there's a lot of. And really, what that stems from is a lack of understanding of what the real risk is that's before us. Is this really as bad as we think it is? Now, I have another whole talk that I do on how to break down risk and decide where we're at on the risk factor. But what we need to do is eliminate a lot of fear. We need to learn how to go for it, to take the plunge, to make our move. Because each time we go for it, take a leap of faith, we change just a little bit. Okay? And if we take a lot of leaps of faith, well then we change a lot. Okay? So practicing taking that leap of faith gives you trust in your decision. Okay? It starts to give you emotional security in the decisions that you make. So it becomes either, well, I don't really care, I'm a professional kayaker, I can just become a professional filmer. What's the problem with that? Okay, so anyway, wouldn't it be cool if there was a way for us to then practice, okay? Because change really requires practice, it requires habits, okay? So let's imagine a hypothetical idea and a way to practice, let's say, taking risks or taking leaps of faith. So let's imagine a huge stadium. Picture the biggest stadium you can picture. Football, maybe, okay? Now we're in the stadium, and if you're a creative mind, you're probably not looking at the box and the set of goals down there. You're looking around you and you're saying, wow, this thing has a huge arch over the top of it. We could attach a rope to the middle of that arch. We could stretch that rope to the edge of the stadium, and we could do a huge swing from the edge of the stadium all the way across. Yeah, that's what this stadium is for, okay? But wait, what if the rope breaks? That's what everyone's going to say. That sounds crazy. That's a stupid idea, okay? Well, what is the real risk here? First and foremost, we're going to eliminate misplaced fear by using a rope that is thousands of pounds stronger than it needs to be. That way, we no longer have to think about what if. What if is out of the question. It's out of the picture. Now all we have to think about is the real question, which is, how are we going to do this? Okay? And in this case, it's pretty simple. The how question is simply, how long does that rope have to be so that when we swing, we don't hit the ground in the middle? Okay, there's another how. Once we're done with that, how are we going to get from the end of the rope back to the ground? But all of this can be worked out with pretty simple math, okay? So basically we're ready to go. Yep. So that idea came from a friend of mine who invented that idea. And guess what? That was so successful that now that is a commercial operation. And yes, any one of you can now go to Durban, South Africa, pay your money. Let's give it a go. I'll figure it out. So any one of you can now go pay your money and do that swing. You can take that leap of faith. And guess what? Thousands of people have. And you know what the most common comment is after they do it? They go, man, it really wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. And you know what? I feel like now that I've done that, I can do anything. Imagine you did that swing this morning. How would your day feel? You'd go get some stuff done. I think they call it releasing the kraken. But what's happening there is they're in the beginnings of forming a habit of taking that leap of faith, okay? Just give me a second here. You know, when you first start forming that habit, you get into the early part of pointing positive, okay? So you're no longer saying, what if, you're saying how, okay? So let's say you're a professional skier. You're focused much more on how am I going to stick this move. You're not thinking about how am I not going to wipe out, okay? We call that pointing positive, okay? We all can stand to listen to those words. I myself too, okay? But when we first start taking these leaps of faith, we don't really have an emotional attachment to that positive thinking. And that's because we haven't practiced, okay? Taking those steps, implementing change, it takes practice. You have to do it over and over again. And what you find is, when you go big, you go bigger. When you go bigger, you go even bigger. And that is the foundation of the 500 athletes sponsored by Red Bull, always going bigger and bigger and bigger. They're changing. We're all changing every single time we do a thing, and we're becoming desensitized to what we did before, and we want more. And that is how humans evolve. We want more, okay? Kayaking, base jumping, motocross, whatever. It all means nothing in the world, okay? But there's a nice analogy there that we can all learn from, I believe. And those analogies exist in every one of your fields as well. You all know people that go for it. And when they go for it, the next thing, they're dreaming up the biggest project they can possibly imagine, and then suddenly that's done, and suddenly they do an even bigger one, and they go, wow, how did I think that other one was the biggest thing I could ever do? So I've used sport to figure out who I am, okay? But the problem is that when you attach yourself to what you do, and what you do becomes who you are, what happens when you no longer can do that? Okay, and so in the case of a sports athlete, Jesus, I'm going to give up with those. So what happens when you can no longer do your sport? Okay, suddenly you're set in this moment of like, okay, who am I? So, as you may or may not have noticed, Red Bull is a major sponsor of mine. In fact, they're the biggest sponsor of mine since 2002 and the biggest part of my income. I tell you that because I was faced with the moment of saying, I'm going to have to address this. So I got on a plane, flew myself to LA, called a meeting with the head of athlete marketing, the head of media content, and my athlete manager. And I said, yo, what's up? And I said, I don't want to be an athlete anymore. I took that plunge. I said, I want to be a part of Red Bull, but I want none of my income to be attached to me taking risks. Baby on the way, beautiful wife, life is good, and you need to know when to stop. And guess what they said? They said, well, we're really glad you came to us and told us that you would like to change, because the people that we cut loose are the people that are unwilling to change, those who are unwilling to evolve within the company. So we have built a relation with you, the person, with who you are. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to keep paying you while we figure out what you're going to do. How sweet is that? So suddenly I realized that all those sleepless nights were for nothing. I realized that I could in fact continue with my sport. I could just back it off a little bit to where I could just enjoy it. So my first order of business was, okay, cool, this is not the extreme Red Bull stuff, but I'm going to do a kayak instructional movie, okay? Because I want to leave some of my experience to the new kayakers that are coming in. And the way I'm going to raise the funds for that is through a Kickstarter campaign. A bunch of you probably recognize that. I asked the kayaking community for $55,000. They gave me $83,000. So I'd call that a successful campaign. And what that proved was that if you're giving back to your community enough, the career will follow. The people trust you with their change. In this case, it was simply the change of how to become a better kayaker. And so they sent myself and a group of the world's best kayakers to the Zambezi River to make this movie. So suddenly, there I am on the Zambezi River with the world champion, his dad, a 3 times past world champion, that crocodile, and I'm behind the camera instead of in front of the camera, and here I am, the envy of every other kayaker on earth, paddling with a group of the world's best on my own river. How cool is that? All because I was willing to change my perspective and change my identity. And as a bonus, I got to walk around rapid number 9, one of my favorite rapids, for the first time in 20 years and feel good about it. That's not me running it, that's my friend Benny. And then at the end of the trip, we had a guy called Lonnie Bedwell fly in to join us. He's the guy in the green kayak in the middle. At the end of our filming for the instructional, we were like, hey, we're going to show this guy down the river. He is the guy on the left, and he's blind. Yes. No vision. Let's talk about change. Okay? He's an ex-Navy officer who was shot in the face, lost his eyesight, decided to take up kayaking after he became blind, ran the Grand Canyon, and then called us up and said, hey, can I come with you guys to the Zambezi? So we showed him down the Zambezi. And the way we did that was one kayaker in front of him, one behind him, both yelling at the top of his voices, and he would just follow the sound. He'd put himself between the two. He ran the whole river, every rapid, no swims. We filmed the whole thing. So, there he is. And what I said to him at the end of the trip, after what I think was a pretty moving experience was, hey Lonnie, you didn't get to come with us on the Zambezi. We got to be on the trip with you. Obviously a hugely inspiring trip. And I was so impressed that I made this meme. Quite like my memes. Lonnie Bedwell just kayaked the Zambezi. He's blind. What's your excuse? So I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, as you guys can tell, you're meeting me now in a point of transition. I'm at a point in my life that is very sobering and scary time. Okay? I have an 8-month-old baby. I'm a pro kayaker. Aging. I don't call it old, I call it experienced. And I'm wondering where this is going to go. But I think we're realizing that we can make change happen. It's inevitable. And as soon as we accept that it's happening with or without us, then it's not unexpected change. Okay? And we mustn't be complacent. Even if we're at the top of our game right now, we need to stay on our game because someone's coming. Someone's coming from behind. We also mustn't become the guy that sits on the gym equipment talking to his friend about his high school football career. Because there's a guy like me waiting to get his beach muscles ready for the next mission. So let's change it. Let's make it better. What do you guys think about that? So that's all I have for you guys today. I'm going to roll out with a little clip that I think embodies my current vibe. And that was a recent expedition we did in Yosemite National Park, and we got to be a part of a change in legislation where kayaking went from being a crime to a sport. How cool is that? Would you believe that kayaking is now illegal in Yosemite National Park? So with that, I'll play that out, and
sometimes home is just a place to be. We get lost simply to find our way. These adventures are often worth sharing. We team up to separate ourselves. Friendship through shared experience. Join us as we go beyond adventure, presented by Outside Television and Jeep Renegade, the Lost Valley of the Merced.
Okay, guys, we got a few more minutes with Steve, so fire away some Q&A. He's excited to answer your questions.
all right.
You may want to speak up a little bit. Just
I'll repeat the question back. Yeah, how's it, man? Right. Okay, so testing. So what he was saying was that when he's trying to implement change, he finds that there are a few core qualities that stay the same. So do I have those core qualities? Well, yes. I mean, as I talked about before, I went pretty hard political pretty early, right? And I say that with purpose because I watched this political charade that's on the go right now. And one of the things that always catches me is they say, he flip-flopped. 10 years ago he said this and now he says this. I'm always like, yeah, but he's allowed to change. Like, if he's not allowed to change, then I'm not allowed to change. Like, I grew up in a society that was complete bigotry by law. So, if you're not allowed to change a view, then I'm just screwed, okay? So, to, I think, a huge degree, one can be allowed to make a massive shift in your life. I think you can change your persona completely. But yes, I do believe there's some core values in there. I think those core values are whatever you choose them to be. You know, like I do, like a thing I do is I sleep easy at night knowing that no matter what decision I make, I will never screw anybody over. Okay? I will never knowingly harm anyone or screw them up. That makes me feel really good, and it's part of a decision-making protocol. This amount of money being offered for this project may be very appealing, but it involves screwing that person over knowingly. I'm not going to do it. That's a simple decision. If I ever unknowingly hurt someone, screw them over, well then the first thing I do is try and make it right. So that's like a core value that you can keep. Okay, and then there's other, talking of decision-making protocols, there's things I do as well, which is I have a simple priority list, and I say, my wife, my child, my friends, my personal activity and recreation, and my work, in that order. Now you can choose what your priority list is and what order you wanted it, but that is my order. Okay, so, baby's crying. Wife, are you okay? Yes, I'm okay. Okay, baby, let's deal with you. Baby's crying, but phone's ringing for work. Sorry, baby's crying. Unapologetic. Phone's ringing for work. I'm out kayaking, not answering. I do the training, the recreation first, and then I do the work. And when you do it that way, you usually find you get to do both. If you mix your priority up and you say, I'll do the work first, then I'll go, then you usually end up not going. It starts raining, it gets cold, and then. So I think you can just select out a few things. It seems like you're a pretty introspective guy. If you've even come up with that question, it means that you can just choose some core values. Okay, these are my core values, I'm sticking with it. And back to that political thing, that was, again, it's like a lot of people don't actually stop and think about where they stand, like really face up to it and say, where do I stand? And no matter who asks me, what will I say? No matter who asks me, I'm not going to shift around, this is where I stand. And you'll find that when you're forced into your position, I like to think it puts you in, it forces you to make the right choice. Yes. 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 She said, I spoke a lot about identity and Steve Fisher, the kayaker, and who's Steve Fisher, the kayaker now? Well, I'd started earning a living as a filmmaker, albeit at a pretty amateur level, before I got sponsors for kayaking. In fact, I made some kayaking films to fund the habit, and that's kind of how I started. So I've kind of returned to that, and that's definitely where my passion lies. That little clip I just showed you at the very end, we ran the Merced River in Yosemite National Park. I worked on that for like 4 to 6 months, full-time work, and the actual time on the river was 5 days. Same for the Congo, 4 years, a week on the river. Right, but I'm getting to your question. I'm like a politician. So the Merced one, I said to the guys afterwards, the accomplishment here was not running the river. The Merced River is just another river. I have literally run thousands of rivers, and I really enjoyed it, but the accomplishment was bringing a film crew through there safely, all with a permit, which was no small feat. Okay, you should try getting a film permit in Yosemite National Park, with a ranger watching us 24 hours a day, present, and all of the footage in the can. No cameras lost, no cameras broken, no footage lost, everything's there. That was the accomplishment. So my identity is Steve Fisher, the filmmaker. Steve Fisher, the family guy. That's what I want to be. And you know, I've started trying to diversify the stuff that I shoot. So I called up the guys who produced the coverage for the Red Bull Rampage, which is a big mountain bike event in Utah where they go off the cliffs and all of that. I thought that would be a really cool thing to film. I knew the guys, I've worked with them, they said, yeah, pull on in. But when I showed up, my point of contact wasn't standing there. It was just a big, like, hundreds of thousands of dollar production with dudes who had no idea who I was, okay? So I showed up as the new camera guy. And you know what? It was awesome. I was done no favors because I'm a Red Bull athlete. I was done no favors because of my accomplishments as a kayaker. And as a matter of fact, on day one, we all got together, and this guy actually literally wears army camo, and he like directs everyone to do the stuff. And he goes, Scottish, new guy, that generator needs to be at the start. And the start's like 3,000 foot of earth away. And off I went. That was my whole morning, was carrying a generator on my shoulder to the top, to the start. And I was like, this is so sweet. I have the new guy job, okay? And the production went on, and I was shooting. I was one of the cameras on the hill, and you've got an intercom in your ear. The live show's going on. And the director of the live show has no idea who's on which camera. You're just a number, so I'm camera 4. And through the show, it's going along, and I'm shooting away. And maybe 5 or 6 times during the live show, they cut to my camera at the end of my shot. The director goes, great shot, camera 4. And I was like, yes. He has no idea who I was, and he just complimented me for the work, nothing else. And so that's really where I am, and that's really what I'm enjoying at the moment. Yeah. So in terms of a career, that's who I'd like to be, Steve Fisher, the filmmaker. Right. So the question was, some athletes make a good transition into other careers or whatever, and some don't. And what are some core values that could help transition into something creative and maybe a bit more in the field of what we're in? I think that, first of all, I think it depends on the sport a lot. I'm obviously biased, but I think that kayaking really lends itself to the idea of, we're going to go up to the top of that mountain into that gorge over there, and we're going to spend 5 days coming down that gorge. And while you're out there, you can't call mom and ask you to come get you. You know, like, there's one way out of there, and that's out of there, and it's difficult. And you know, when we play the videos, you see the highlights, but we might take 9 hours to move a mile. So I think that set me up really well for, you know, values like tenacity and determination, and then some of the stuff that. And the idea that we are getting through this. Okay, so I use this in my film editing all the time. Okay, I have a team I work with, and sometimes I'll have an editor, a young guy or something, helping, and he'll be stuck on a problem, an editing problem. How are we going to create this arc? How are we going to tell this piece of the story? And just stuck, like writer's block. And I'll just say, we have to get through this. We have to get this done. There is no backing out. There is no problem. You know, in kayaking, you're in the flow, you're in the white water, and when stuff starts going wrong, you know what? You figure it out and you make a new plan, because the river's not stopping. You can't go, I don't want to do this anymore. You've got to make a plan. And so I think that's a core value I get from my sport. Now, once again, depending on your sport, some sports pay really well. And dare I say it, okay, would I have loved to make enough money to retire through kayaking? Oh, that would have been pretty sweet. But it wouldn't have really taught me how to milk water from a stone, you know. People like parents and my girlfriend's parents, you know, would be like, so, what are you planning to do, you know, when you're done with this guy? And I'd say, don't you worry. Making a career out of kayaking is so hard that everything else is going to be easy. So I'm not too worried. So that's how the sport kind of lends itself. So I hope that some sports don't kind of spoil people. Like, you're awesome, here's a bunch of money. I don't think that sets you up very well. So I hope that, you know, people still do their own stuff, you know, manage their own affairs, to learn the business practices, to learn the way. Like, in kayaking, the income was too low to have an agent. So there's no agent to take 15% of any sponsorship deal, because 15% of nothing is nothing, or 15% of a little bit is a little bit. It's not worth the time for an agent. So I approached a few agents over the years, and they wouldn't do it because the work that it would require wasn't worth it. And that's fine, but what it taught me was to be my own negotiator. So if I spoke to other athletes who are currently in the field, I'd say, hey man, do your own stuff, because you're going to need it, you know. So now I know how to walk in to an office of anyone, because one minute I'm talking to the owner, Red Bull, and the next minute I'm talking to the owner of some little kayak brand, mom and pop shop. So there's the full range there, and I'm not afraid to walk in. You know, when I went to the Congo, the Minister of Parliament I was dealing with said, you're going to need Office of the President as your convoy, armed. I was like, okay, let's get them. He's like, oh. You know the president's going to have to sign off on that. I'm like, okay, call the president. That's my attitude, you know. So I would tell people to adopt that attitude. So now, as I'm trying to present a film idea or any marketing project, whatever, I'm unafraid to walk into an office and someone says, you know, we're having a bit of an economic slowdown now, so budgets are really tight. Well, my response to that is, and that is exactly why you need me, because you need value for money. And I'm used to doing that in the kayak industry. So yeah, I hope that athletes can learn that. I think it's down to the person too. Last question. Yes.
You found that now that you've done that, you're able to share the journey more with your wife and child. Because maybe jumping on the skating with the baby in the kayak wasn't
Right. The question was, am I able to share my experiences more with my family now than when it was just kayaking? And by the way, kayaking is at face it's very individualistic, and it is. When you're in the moment, it's just you and the river, but it's very much about camaraderie. But my wife's not a kayaker, so she doesn't come on those trips, and you know, she sometimes would prefer not to know exactly the details of what's going on. So on my Congo expedition, I took a swim and I almost drowned, and she only found out about it 6 months later when I was done editing the film. I never told her, and I swore the whole team to secrecy. I was like, she doesn't need to know this, it's a negative vibe. So I swam, and then I had to really regroup myself and get it together because we had to keep going with the mission. And I called her as we were entering the real big stuff, and I was personally very emotional, but trying not to reveal it. I'm like, hey, today's the big day, whatever, and she's like, don't forget to wear sunscreen. So yes, there was a big divide there. Now with the filmmaking, yes, I am able to share it more. So I'm looking for opportunities that include them a little bit more, and you know, they're able to travel with me a little bit. My 8-month-old is ready. We've got 3 countries and 8 states, so that's nice. They aren't with me here, but I think that as we move forward, I'll be able to share that more. And I'm able to spend a lot of time at home because all of those, all the projects require a lot of lead up and a lot of editing on the backside. So it's like away for a stint and then home for a bunch of time. And it's awesome. You know, it seems like 1 million people have had babies, and I'm like, this is the best thing ever. My baby's the best. It's pretty cool. Last one.
I had a question. It's kind of a mindset. Do you agree with the whole not having a plan B, just going for plan A and just sticking with that, or do you always like to have a backup plan?
Okay, the question was, do I like to always just stick with plan A and have no plan B? I absolutely like to have a plan B, especially now as time goes. One thing I don't ever do in kayaking now is find myself in a situation where if I screw up, I die. And I've really, when it boils down to it, I haven't done that many times. Okay, it's usually there's an out, and that's something you want. Now, one thing that I like to dispel is the idea of never giving up. That's just a crappy cliche. Like, what is that? Like, be true to yourself, never give up. This is dumb stuff, okay? We're canceling that today. Never give up becomes don't give up too easily, okay? Because if you're unwilling to give up, or take plan B, that inhibits your ability to take a risk. Okay, if there's no plan B, you might not take that risk. So if I'm facing a rap and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try for that, and if that doesn't happen, I'm going to do that. That makes this rapid a lot more runnable. And so that's the same in life as well. And to be able to give up is awesome. Okay, so we were going to rappel down this 300-foot waterfall with our kayaks and try to run the rapids below. We did it, and when we were in the bottom, we realized the wind from the waterfall was too strong and we couldn't kayak. It was just blowing us against the wall on the other side of the river. So instead of the way out, which was down the rapids, we had to use the same ropes we rappelled in with and climb up them. I couldn't walk for like a week because my legs were so still climbing a rope. Okay, so that was plan B, and that was us giving up. But guess what? We were making a TV show about it. We did nothing of what we set out to do, but the show was awesome. By the end of the show, people were like, holy shit, they're climbing up that rope next to a waterfall. Meanwhile, that was not the goal at all. So I think the best plans are the ones with the plan B. So, you know, I mean, and I don't think you should be afraid to pursue something that either has a plan B or just an out altogether. You know, I've done loads and loads of missions that just haven't panned out, and sometimes my friends more than me will take it hard. They'll be like, oh man, whatever. I'm like, hey man, if we just eliminated that option, that's already an accomplishment. Now we don't have to think about that anymore. It's kind of like I lean over a rap and my sunglasses fall off. I'm like, well, now I don't have to worry about losing my sunglasses anymore. Plan B, no sunglasses. So yes, plan Bs are good, I think.